Hey, everybody, welcome back to the CEO's Guide to Marketing. Today, I am sitting with the CMO of Walmart, William White. William, thank you for being here.
Hey, I'm very excited you've had me. I've listened to the podcast and love it, so it's fun to be a guest.
Oh, well, thank you. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and give us 5 stars, William. But let me credential you, not that your reputation doesn't precede you, but you've been at Walmart as CMO for 5 years. And prior to coming there, you had over 25 years of customer and commercial leadership experience in global organizations, really focused a lot of your career on CPG and retail, specifically and including Target and Coca-Cola. If I have this right, at Walmart, you've got responsibility for the full range of marketing strategy, including customer insights, experience, and planning. And kind of from a remit perspective, not shockingly, there's a real focus on driving demand and building loyalty by both strengthening and modernizing the Walmart brand, reframing Walmart, the world's largest physical-based retailer, as a digital-first destination. And while you have many, many accolades, amongst them is that you have appeared on excuse me, listeners, I just cleared my throat. Amongst them is that you have appeared on the Forbes World's Most Influential list 4 times. In 2023, you appeared as number 1 on that list. And I don't remember exactly where you were last year. Could you refresh my memory?
I think you know better than I do. I did not repeat. I did not repeat. I fell behind some worthy and illustrious CMOs.
While it is a ranked list, everybody on that list is influential, and
we're all winners. We're all winners.
It's an honor just to be nominated, as I said on stage at the Oscars quite recently, in my own head. Okay, thank you for being with us. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, again, psyched to be here. I'm very eager to dig in with you today.
All right, actually, let's just jump right in. So, I referenced just a minute ago that, an important part of your job is strengthening and modernizing the Walmart brand, really opening the aperture on the Walmart brand's historical framing. A lot of my previous guests on the show have pointed to, when we've talked about brand, they've pointed to the accretive value of a strong brand being, amongst other things, the ability to drive pricing power, to drive incremental margin, to ask for more for the same thing than your competitor, perhaps. But for Walmart, who has decades long been an EDLP marketer, everyday low pricing marketer, the value of brand is not, in fact, in pricing power, but in framing, as my friend Chris Ross at Gartner says, why you and not them, right? Because you do, in fact, compete on price. You just compete on lower price, or right. EDLP. So talk to us about the import of that strengthening of the brand for Walmart, and when pricing power isn't its value, what is?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we should start with the premise of what is a brand, and which I know you'll want to explore in more detail. But at the simplest, maybe good way to set that up, if a brand is a promise kept, Walmart has been focused on the core of our promise, which is everyday low price, for 62 years. And
62 years EDLP.
62 years of EDLP. And so our power, I think, comes from keeping that promise of everyday low price to our customers for 62 years. That has enabled us to build trust, that it has enabled us to build the strong brand that we have, and to keep people coming back. Now, you've alluded to a modernization of the brand. And, I think that in recent years, we are expanding that promise and offering more reasons for customers to come in. And, and for us, we've been earning their dollars, certainly with the low price, but increasingly we've had a stronger assortment, where we've had better quality goods, like great organic and foods. We've had better style, but we were also really driving a greater level of convenience. And so I think that so what has often brings people in is the low price, and they know that they can trust us for that. I think what is keeping customers with us in recent years, as there's many options, easy, at your fingertips, is a better assortment and a better experience. And so again, the promise kept, I think, has built the trust that has enabled the growth that we've seen.
So I wanna ask you then, how do you define the value of the brand as opposed to the role of the brand, right? So if the role of the brand is the promise kept, right, to ensure that you're delivering that, excuse me, again, the value of a strong brand, when it doesn't strategically lead to the ability to create pricing elasticity, what role does it play in customer acquisition and retention? And how would you explain that to not your CEO? Doug obviously gets this, but to a CEO or a CFO who might not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the power of a brand draws people in. And then if you're keeping that promise, if you are staying true to who you are and you are delivering value for the customer, where they feel that they are getting more than they give, then that creates the loyalty and the engagement that ultimately leads to customer lifetime value. And I think that any CFO or CEO certainly would strive for that. You want to have customer lifetime value. You want to build a strong customer base, and brand is an enabler of that. It is a driver. It is a driver of that.
For
it prevents CEOs, and just to say like one last thing on that. I mean, it allows you to move from the transactional to the emotional in a way where you are reducing the switching that you might have in moving out. If the relationship is just transactional, you can be replaced. Right. And brand enables that emotional connection that keeps someone there.
All right. Let's talk about emotion, because I think it's so important, right? And it has been a through line in our conversations on the show. And I think it's that to paint the rest of the C-suite with a broad brush, right? To speak generically and broadly, it's very hard to quantify emotion. And I don't know that, and you may have a different opinion, that, again, speaking globally and broadly, that there is in fact an understanding and appreciation of the role emotion plays, even and in particular subconscious emotions, in driving purchase decisions. How might you explain that, right? Because you can't see it, you can't quantify it, you can't measure it. You can measure outcomes of it. How might you explain it to the CFO in this instance, that's like emotion schmotion, show me the fucking numbers?
It's yes, you cannot quantify everything. I would maybe kind of take a step back and talk through maybe a series of KPIs that kind of to think about that kind of get there. But I think, if the role of marketing is to create and capture demand, then you have to look at what is the role of marketing in driving traffic and driving sales. And I think that is pretty easy to quantify. Most marketers have a way of tracking that. You track what is the engagement and loyalty that you're driving. So are you increasing if moving kind of people up in the relationship journey with you from a casual to a weekly customer? That is a sign of engagement and loyalty. And then how are you building brand equity? What are the core components of your equity as a brand that you're trying to reinforce and move the needle on. Though all of those things are traceable and trackable.
Mm-hmm. Can you give the audience just a couple of for example, we trace and track X?
Yeah. So for marketing driven sales, we use a marketing mix model, classic MMM,
Mm-hmm.
and where, we are looking at all of the different factors that, all of the investment decisions that we're making from a marketing standpoint to understand the efficacy of those, the role that they're playing in driving incremental sales. And there are non-marketing factors, of course, as well. And that's all tracked within the model.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that is not something that is a real time. I mean, as marketers who use MMM know, I mean, that's not something that's used in real time to make kind of daily tracking decisions, but that helps you look at the kind of the totality on a monthly, quarterly basis of, where and how the channels are driving their effectiveness for you.
Okay.
As an example, on equity measures, I mean, those are custom trackers that we run around different dimensions of the brand. We look at a total brand NPS score,
Net promoter
score, as kind of an overarching marker for the brand. And so, kind of long-winded way in to say there are a number of metrics that we are tracking. It is so important to note that all of these things work in conjunction.
Right.
And so just go back to the marketing mix. We know that if we're trying to drive short-term sales, obviously there are conversion level tactics and spend that, we could invest in to drive. But we also know that the more upper funnel marketing activities make the lower funnel work harder.
Right.
And so the more we are building a level of awareness, the more we are building a level of, kind of broad engagement in the brand, that makes the conversion work harder. And so again, you've got to create demand and capture demand. And part of creating the demand is building the brand.
Actually, I want to ask you about that because, you talk about the relationship between the upper funnel and the lower funnel, which I think is just lost by so many, both on the marketing side and across the C-suite. Not everyone, so for the listeners who are like, no, I get it. Like, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about others. But when you refer to awareness, I'm going to assume for the moment, tell me if I'm wrong, that, Walmart's got pretty high awareness.
Sure.
So for you, and I'm thinking about your Q4 results. I think it was Q4. I know it was at the end of last year. Is your fiscal calendar?
Yeah, we end our fiscal year at the end of January.
Okay, so
yeah, we run February to January. So Q4 is
it might have been Q4 or Q3, but a lot of the growth in your business, if I recall correctly, and obviously let me know if I don't, was driven by kind of, a new household, which is the 100,000 plus household.
Correct.
And so to drive the upper funnel with that audience, to invite new higher demographic audiences in, you didn't need awareness, you needed a different understanding, a different comprehension, a different relationship with the brand. Yes. How did you plan for that, and what lessons beyond, retail? Because retail is such a beast of its own. Walmart amongst the biggest of those beasts.
It's a big beast.
It's a big beast. What lessons, might other C-suite folks learn from what you did there?
Sure. Lot to unpack in that. You're correct. We don't need more broad scale brand awareness. We have, the highest of the high, brand awareness. But there's a reframe that we have been driving for the last couple of years. And the reframe really has two dimensions to it. One, that we are beyond, the great stores that we're known for and, being in communities all over the country. We are a digital first destination. And so building greater awareness of our digital capabilities and the digital relationship with our customers has been a big part of the reframe. And that includes things like you can get you can get Walmart delivered in less than an hour. And, that is kind of new news for people. There's awareness to drive around the convenience factor of Walmart with fast delivery.
So it's not awareness of Walmart, it's awareness of this service offering.
Yeah.
Right.
And really, yes, absolutely. But really important to say, we need to drive awareness of the service offering, but it's not only hitting the RTBs, it's also a reframe of who is the Walmart brand. So yes, we're gonna hit the fast delivery as a reason to believe, but it needs to ladder into a broader reframe about who is Walmart and driving a new level of reconsideration about Walmart. So that, there's a brand change element to that as well. So the digital first destination, the fast delivery, that's kind of component one. Component two is the change in assortment. And, again, you can look across the categories, but whether it's in food and having just wide range of fresh and organic to on the more general merchandise style discretionary categories, like we have on trend, great quality, fashion, home, and that style component is also new news for people and what they might not have thought about us before.
So let me lean into that a little bit. One of the things I've talked about a lot on previous shows here is in a world where everything connects. In many companies, large and small, but in particular large, not everything is connected. You used a phrase a moment ago that all things work in conjunction, right? So what's and again, kind of talking less perhaps about Walmart specifically, but using it as a reference. You don't control merchandising assortment. You don't control the products and the diversity of products that are on the shelf, but your ability as a CMO to succeed is inextricably linked to them, right? There are these related interdependencies. How do you work internally? Kind of what's a process perspective? I talked about this, for example, with Lorraine Toohill on one of our first shows, where we talked about the relationship of being a marketer and a product-driven organization, right? What's your story of kind of integration? Again, we don't need to make it about Walmart, but the need for and what CEOs need to understand about those related interdependencies that are often disaggregated rather than integrated.
Yeah. I mean, the starting point, which you were articulating, is that everything communicates. And or doesn't.
Yeah.
And so every touch point that someone has with your brand is creating an impression. It is driving the equity, good or bad. And so having a consistent, thorough and consistent brand identity, way of working, way of operating, is really important in a company, such that the brand is showing up across all these touch points in similar ways. And the thing that I say all the time, which, truth be told, I stole from Mark Mathieu, is be it, do it, say it. And the notion of, and I think this is very important for a company, but thinking it in brand terms is, it starts with the be it. Who is the company? What are the values? How are those showing up? How are the actions of the people in the company, the do it part? And then say it. How are you communicating? All of those things have to be linked and have to be real across the organization. And so, kind of more to your question, in terms of the ways of working and the integrating, I think it starts with being really clear on who the brand is, which starts with the promise, the values, and ensuring that when we're operating together, we are, as a leadership team, in sync, and that we're, moving across the same strategy and making sure that we're showing up in ways that are consistent whether that's in a digital environment, a physical environment, through the humans that are interacting with customers. All of those things have to feel like they're part of the brand expression that's consistent.
Can you talk about being in sync across the organization? Can you share a story of keeping it anonymous, of a time when perhaps marketing and X were not in sync, and it really was kind of punching growth or the potential for growth in the face, and how you overcame it, really?
Yeah. Trying to think of a good example here that can be anonymous. But I would maybe say broadly that in a big organization, there are a lot of priorities. Right. And everyone has their thing that they're trying to drive. And I think the times when we are most out of sync is when what we're stating as our overarching get really ruthlessly prioritized down a path, and the secondary or third priorities are showing up in bigger ways and working a little bit more in isolation, in a silo, and that can lead to something for the customer to see where maybe the marketing material, the marketing expression is showing up focused in a certain area, and another part of the business has something else on a much higher volume.
Right. Right.
And those are the types of things. I mean, this kind of broad and generic way of describing it, but when the priorities become a little bit out of whack, or when multiple priorities start to show up and they fragment the message, they fragment the experience for the customer in ways that 1 + 1 is certainly not equaling 2, and certainly not equaling 3, which you're always trying to get. And so that's where things go awry. And so I guess the way of resolving that is just having more clear, robust, senior level moments of clarity and alignment. And at Walmart, we have a lot of really great routines, and we start Monday mornings, senior leaders, very focused on the operations of last week and the week ahead. And throughout the week, we are driving the priorities. At the end of the week, we have meetings with operators to understand where and how things are maybe falling down, where things aren't showing up across the system in the right ways, and we triage that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that notion of triage, which is to say, looking at what is and isn't working and being agile enough to adapt and optimize in real time, right? Retail lives and sometimes dies by that, or the inability to do it.
Yep.
For enterprises, for organizations that aren't retail, right? That same need to continue in an uncertain world, to continue to tweak, modify, learn from what didn't work to optimize for what does is essential for business success, right? It's essential for driving positive outcomes. But I don't think it's understood by a lot of the C-suite that marketing is an imperfect, like every other investment they make in their lives. There's no such thing as a sure thing.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for our C-suite listeners on how to kind of maybe it's about the adoption of a retail mindset for non-retail businesses in terms of how you continue to source improvements from today's data, tomorrow's improvements from today's data?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, maybe it doesn't.
It does, and it does, and I think that it is. It's always the balance of how are you building for the future, how are you keeping everyone strategically focused on the long term, while dabbling in dealing with and being agile in the short term. And you can't it's always a balance. You can't be focused on one more so than the other. I think specifically within marketing, and I think this is kind of important framing, is we have dials that are short-term and long-term. And there are certain activities that we can be far more nimble on and certain ones that have longer lead times. And I think for us, what I work on with our team is that we are appropriately sweating both. And so in a performance marketing environment where, we are really driving the day, the week, the hour sales, like there's a real nimbleness to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when we think about our budgets and the capabilities that we're building for the longer term, there are certain things that we know we need to invest in for the future. There are capabilities we need to invest in for the future. There are certain activities we know like might not have the immediate short-term impact, but are helping us to understand how the market in the marketing world is changing. And so we're not blowing the bank on those, but we are investing in those constantly.
Yeah.
And learning from that and adapting along the way.
I want to ask you a question about kind of, whether there was a formative moment early in your career that kind of led you to be the marketer you are today. But that was going to be my next question. You bring up something that I'm going to get in front of it with, which is, as you're thinking about the futures, you're thinking about the long term. One of the things that I know that you've done in your time with the company is what's the data point? Something like 85% of your media is shoppable media, right?
Yeah.
And you and I would say, Walmart Creator and Forbes, we've partnered on the Creator upfronts, and you've really invested in how marketing will evolve and where the marketing will come from. I'm wondering what you think about kind of the rise of, agentic marketing and bots marketing to bots, and how that may influence the way you look at strat planning for brand and business, both through a marketing lens. I'm asking now for the second time if the question makes sense. By the way, I was out of the country last week for our listeners. I'm like still off my game, so apologies. But
let me. I want to talk to a couple of things you mentioned in there. One, you talked about making the funnel more shoppable, and I want to talk about that a little bit first. And so, I mentioned at the top the importance of how the marketing funnel from awareness down to conversion works together and they support each other. Another big component of what we have been pushing towards and the capabilities we've been building on are how do we collapse the funnel and making the upper funnel more shoppable and the lower funnel more brand driving.
It's really interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt again, but it's, what I love about the way you framed it was how do we collapse the funnel, which is really a proactive and ownership perspective, because what I would have said is the funnel has collapsed, and you're taking that reality and turning it in, that constraint, that challenge, and turning it into an advantage, which shouldn't be lost on our audience.
I want to toot the horn of the Walmart marketing team because I think that we've been driving a lot of that happening. We have been focused on the collapsing of the funnel, making the funnel more shoppable for 5 years now.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways have been at the forefront of social commerce.
Yeah.
And
certainly in the United States for sure.
Yeah. And and of course we've taken learnings from, what we're seeing in China and across Asia. But that's having a great team of people who are super curious and want to do great things and want to innovate and enabling them to do that. And so, I'm excited about how we've moved that needle. We do not look at it as it's happening to us.
Why do you think Asia and China are so far ahead of the U.S. in driving behaviors like that?
There's a whole host of things, but I think that the one, the mobile adoption. I mean, we went from computers to mobile. They went straight to mobile.
Right. Leapfrogged it. Yeah.
And then the digital wallet is so pervasive there.
Yeah.
And the digital wallet enables social commerce to happen.
Right.
And so, being mobile and having that, I think
function drives form.
Yeah.
And what about bots, marketing to bots? Are you planning for that, thinking about it?
Yeah. So you would ask about the AI piece of it.
Yeah, it'd be great if you remembered what I asked you. The questions would be.
Oh, I remembered. I was going to move on.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
I guess what I would say, again, kind of stepping back broadly first on AI, like obviously it's changing how we live and operate. It's changing across our entire business, and whether it's in our supply chain or in other parts of our business. Gen AI is really helping us, I think, to evolve in ways that make us more effective and more efficient. And I would say that within the world of marketing, where we're leaning in first and foremost is on how are we reaching customers. So building audiences, looking at propensity models, things like that, how we're optimizing our bidding tools in kind of the, performance marketing space. And then, creatively, I think it's helping us shorten the distance on concepting.
But the execution,
yeah, but the execution, certainly in the upper funnel space and mid funnel space, are still human driven today. A lot of the DCO and things like that in the lower funnel.
What's DCO?
In the digital, the dynamic creative optimization.
I see. Okay.
And the dynamic creative optimization spaces, there's a lot that Gen AI is helping us power. As we're testing multiple kind of variants of creative executions and things like that. But as far as how bots are showing up marketing to bots, that's happening. We've got to be aware of that. I don't have a silver bullet answer on how to think about that.
It's too new still.
It's too new. But what I would say is, we as a business feel really strongly that we're people led and tech powered, and so we want to leverage technology for us how we're operating. We want to leverage the technology to be a great tool to help us get more effective and efficient. But the human element and the humanity of our brand are so important and critical, and have been for decades and will be for decades to come, that we want to ensure that we're marketing to humans with great human insight, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, which again kind of speaks to kind of a macro theme for this show, or at least it's my own bias, which is not everything that is measured matters, and not everything that you can't measure doesn't matter. To the contrary. Right. So let me get back to that question. Is there a moment or two in your career that you can point to where you're like, okay, my opinions today about the role of marketing are really based on something Sally said to me when I was 4 years into my career?
Yeah, I have a whole host of stories. I don't know how long you want me to go on this.
You cherry pick.
But maybe the first story that I would love to share is more so when I knew that marketing was going to be the field that I would spend my career in.
Okay, let's have it.
And so my first job out of college, I was working for what today is part of the Publicis world, but I was working for a 20th century media company that's been morphed a few times, and I was media planner, media buyer. And I think the second client that I was working on was KitchenAid. And, I'm in my early 20s, living in a very small Manhattan apartment with multiple roommates. And, our kitchen was the size of a card table.
Yeah.
One of my roommates kept his jeans in the oven because the closet was too small. Yeah. Like, the KitchenAid was the farthest thing from who I was. But that was my client. And I became really excited and enamored with getting to understand the KitchenAid target, and their core audience. Again, I couldn't have been further from, but understanding the needs, the wants, the motivations was really interesting to me. And and I geeked out on that. And that was kind of an aha moment to know, after many internships along the way in other kind of fields, like to be working in this and to have this moment was like, wow, this is a field, marketing, that that I'm drawn to and I want to be great at.
Yeah. You bring up such an important point. And I think, at least in my career, I've seen it be a massive tension between CMOs and CEOs in particular. And I can think of one moment specifically from 2002, which I'll tell quickly in a minute. But it's understanding that you're not the target.
Yeah.
And going to understand the target. And, this runs the risk of being cliche, but there are moments when our C-suite colleagues, the CMO's C-suite colleagues, see a piece of marketing work, let's just call it an ad or an ad-like object, and they do not like it.
Yeah.
For whatever personal reason they have, without considering that they are not the target.
Yeah,
right?
Happens all the time.
And I may have told this story on the show before, but it's 2002. I feel like the term has expired, so I was actually, I'll keep the company anonymous. I was with the CMO of one of the world's top 10 brands, global CMO. He gets a call in the middle of a leadership meeting. He steps out to take it. He walks back in, and I could tell the call did not go well, though I didn't know who it was with. And so I said, what just happened? And he said, the chairman of our board, who was an octogenarian at the time, just killed our celebrity ad because he didn't like it.
Yeah.
With no concern for the fact that he's an octogenarian and the ad was targeting 16-year-olds.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars wasted. Why, how do we overcome like the most basic rule of comedy and marketing, which is knowing your audience and reminding our colleagues that if they're not the audience, absent the data that informs them about the audience, their opinion may be a little bit less important than someone else's.
Happens all the time. It's happened at every company that I've worked in, inevitably. I don't know if I have a great answer of how to avoid that, but I think that the more the CMO can do to help the C-suite really understand the brand and really understand the customer, that's kind of the starting point. And that honestly is the role of the CMO. I mean, they need to be the voice of the customer. They need to bring and really paint the picture for the C-suite. I can tell you at a different, in a different company I was in, this is a good story. The C-suite spent a lot of time going out and spending time with customers in their homes, in stores. And I think like those moments of humanity and connection with the actual customer is very enlightening.
It's everything.
And that is a great practice for any C-suite to take part in, to really know, to your point, know the audience.
Yeah.
And you're going to know that by spending time with them in their homes, spending time with them, like out when they're shopping, not just your store, but other stores. That gives perspective. And I think that ultimately is the starting point.
I couldn't agree more, and great advice for really everyone in our audience, regardless of role, which is just get out there. I'll tell you, when early in my career, it was probably second year of my career, 7-Up, the 7-Up bottler in LA was Avion's. I was at Avion distributor, and riding a delivery truck for an afternoon was like one of the most enlightening things. And even 2 years into my career, reframed how both I approach things and how I thought we might approach things, because I was audacious enough to suggest that 2 years into my career. All right, we are getting to time, so I want to ask you kind of, our some of our quick questions and quick answers. Though I'm not gonna ask you. The first two are: a marketing is fill in the blank and a brand is fill in the blank. I think you've answered both of those kind of in the course of our conversation. So let me start with what's traditionally our third, which is what, from your perspective and experience, not just speaking about your job, but the job of the CMO, is the hardest part?
We can do anything, but we can't do everything.
Love that.
And in a world where there are a lot of priorities, in a world where everyone's thing is the thing that we have to talk about and market, it's like, yes, we can do those. But if we're going to break through, we need to prioritize.
I have actually, I'm going to pull it off right here. I've had this, I don't know if our people can see it. I've had this on my desk since probably 2 years into my career. And it's a pyramid that says prioritize, focus, execute with efficiency. And I do think we lose sight of the fact, many of us, that strategy is, in fact, as Indra Nooyi said, the art of sacrifice. Good, great note. All right, so with that, a moment of empathy for our CEO friends. What's the hardest part from your perspective of being a CEO today? Not an easy job.
I think it's easily the fact that you have to triage today's problem while building tomorrow's future. And we've spent a lot of the first half of this conversation talking about that, of the balance between short term and long term. And I think the CEO absolutely should be building confidence in the future and leaning into where the company is going. But there's still there are problems all the time. And so where and how you're helping to fix those while keeping focused on the long term, I think that's a really hard part of the job.
Brutally hard. And by the way, it's the same, I would argue, for really for everyone's job, just at a scale that is, and with implications that are massive, size of organization dependent. What do you think is at the root of tensions, should they exist, and I'm sure they don't in your world, between a CMO and their C-suite colleagues? What do you think maybe one or two of the biggest tensions are?
I mean, I think doing more with less is a real challenge, and that goes into the prioritization conversation, right? In a world where we want to keep expenses down, keep budgets tight, all of those things, while as we're building growth and capabilities and new things within a company, how do we make sure that we're telling that story to customers? And so, that balance is challenging. I certainly think also that we've talked about today, not everything is measurable, is a hard one. And then related to that, I think, is balancing, how marketing is driving short-term sales with long-term growth. And how we're building the brand for the future, and where that tension is between, okay, well, we also have to move the needle right now.
I wonder if there's, you used a word which was expense, keeping expenses down, and I wonder if the tension, not the tension, is in that too many of our C-suite colleagues see marketing as an expense rather than an investment.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, absolutely. I do think that's the case. I am happy to say, I think we at Walmart right now are in the best place we've ever been, certainly in a reframing of that, where I think, it is widely understood within the company that marketing is an investment for growth. And I have great partnership with the CFO on that. He has been a fantastic advocate and ally for investing more in marketing. And we did invest more. I mean, if you listen to our last earnings call, that came up. We invested more, and we see the results of that. And so we've moved from a marketing as a fixed expense, you set it in your annual planning cycle, to more of a variable marketing model, where as we're seeing growth, we're continuing to invest in. And that's been a huge unlock and a great, great game changer. And it's through, fantastic partnership with the CFO and the finance team.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about that is many things, but you talked about kind of being a reframing, and a lesson for the CMOs in our audience, which is you have to earn the permission to have earned trust. That gets back to expectation management and the definition and narrative you build around value, which actually leads me to this second to last question, which is, if you had the proverbial magic wand and could wave it to address any one C-suite misconception about marketing and or marketers, what would it be?
Marketing does not equal advertising.
Yes.
Marketing does not equal campaigns.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the framing is, think about marketing as customer, strategy, capabilities, and campaigns too. But the breadth of the discipline and how it comes together is not just the pretty pictures department.
Yeah, it's amazing that in 2025 we have to have that conversation, but I'll share that I think there are a lot of marketers out there who need to remember the same thing. We're well past the time where advertising as a proxy for marketing has expired. It's a lever, it's a tool. All right, last question for you, sir. Brands and businesses grow when?
They understand and serve the needs of their customers better than the competition.
Yeah, period, the end. William White, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Always so much fun to have you.
I always enjoy our conversations and time together, and good to spend this virtual time with you today.
Yes. By the way, a very nice woodsy background. You look great against it. Again, thank you for real for being here. To our listeners, smash that subscribe button, as I said to William up front, hit those 5 stars, and let us know if you have any thoughts, questions, or queries of your own. We'd love to hear it. You can send those to Forbes CMO at Forbes.com. Thanks, everybody.